It was presented on the 14th of December, and we got it passed around June. So
no, May.
May.
And assented on June.
So taking this into account and realizing the fact that within this year, we've gotten some sense of macroeconomic stability. We've gotten some sense of improvement in our foreign exchange earnings. We've gotten some sense of even political stability in relation to the production of the variables that makes up the ingredients to which we will now get in the money with which to finance the budget. Taking this into cognizance and realizing the significance of 2018 being the year of principally political activities geared towards election, the upper year. And going into that, coupled with the synergy we are getting now, the executive and the legislative arms of government are coming closer, are understanding themselves better. There is that stability, that there's the interest of Nigeria over and above any other consideration. So it is expected that even though they are having only 21 legislative days now before the end of the year 2017, it is expected that they will give it expeditious consideration so that we will be able to have stable budgetary accounting year, so that we'll be able to have from January to December as our accounting or fiscal year.
All right, thank you. Let's go over to our Lagos Center now, where Tilewa Adibaju is, and put the same question to him. It's, well, it's a little bit different from the past 5 years when the budget would almost cross into January before it is presented. But this, we have seen this early presentation. What do you think about it?
Thank you very much, and good evening once again. Obviously a very positive development, and I think if we set this against the backdrop of the fact that we're just coming out of a recession, it's important that we build business confidence. And these sort of actions help build business confidence. We've just seen, as you mentioned earlier, Cyril, at the opening remarks, the issues we've had in terms of the World Bank ranking and how that has helped with creating a more enabling business environment in Nigeria. If we begin to pass our budgets on time, this will also help those sort of rankings, and it will help general business confidence, not only for the local investors in this country, but we begin to look at the international investors to begin to take Nigeria more seriously. Invariably, we have to reflect on the Vice President's speech yesterday, which he gave quite a very detailed economic analysis and framework, where he said we cannot afford another recession, and the delay in the passage of the budget also causes or excavates the recession. And if the National Assembly, I think, should be able to work hard enough to pass the budget before the end of this year, it will be a major confidence builder in terms of boosting the economy and helping us out of recession for next year. Because the growth targets that has been set for this budget for next year is quite aggressive. So all items and details have to be properly implemented. And if we have the will and the political will to get it across, I see no reason why we can't pass this budget before the end of the year to be able to sustain the momentum we have in terms of improving our business environment.
Stay with you there in Lagos and say, well, this budget is tagged budget of consolidation. It's about 16% higher than what we had for 2017. Why do you think this increase came in?
Well, the increase, I think, is it's just marginal. It's not that significant. If you take a look at the areas of devaluation, you find out that in terms of devaluation, in terms of what the currency was last year against this year, you find out that the increase is probably just adjusting for that devaluation. It's important to look at other salient issues in terms of not only the size of the budget, but in terms of sort of revenue targets that we've set. This budget is looking to generate 11 trillion naira for the economy, of which part the federal governments will be looking at 6 trillion on an expenditure of 8 trillion. So there's still the knotty issues of the deficit that we still need to finance of about 2.5 trillion. So good increase, but I think if you take a look at inflation and you take a look at devaluation, you find out that the increase probably has adjusted for both devaluation and the inflation rates.
All right, back here in Abuja, Mainasara, size and the fact that this is meant to consolidate on the gains, and some people are looking at that. That's not much has been, I mean, comparatively, achieved with the 2017 budget, which is still ongoing anyway.
Yes, what is important in budgeting is you consider the assumptions vis-a-vis the positivities, so that you will be able to now see what are those areas that you will be having reservations with a view to advising the governments to adjust as the budget year is going on. If you look at the submission, the assumptions of the budget, 2.3 million barrels per day for the production of the oil in the oil sector, which is still taking about 90% of the mainstay of our economy. And then 305 naira to $1 at the exchange rate distant, again inflationary rate for 12% inflationary rate, and then 3.5% for the growth rate. If you take the aggregate of all this, you'll discover, like my colleague said, it's an aggressive vision towards getting stability for the nation. More gladly speaking, the international community, the acceptance of the international community is very, very remarkable this time around, going by the fact that we are now having records of more export than import, which is a very, very important point of consideration in foreign exchange drive, because foreign exchange is the determinant of our foreign reserve, and by extension the determinant of the confidence with which investors will have to come into Nigeria, and as well as encouraging the domestic production, which will assist also in the GDP increase. So when you take all this into account, taking $45 per barrel of the projected oil, which I think now is about $60 per barrel, is very, very reasonable. And given the inflationary percentage and all these things, and most importantly is the synergy among the diverse arms of the government, which is very, very fundamental. You need to have the political balance correct for you to think of establishing economic activities. Now, going to the positivities, if you take some strategic policies that the president unfolded today, for example, the issue of creation of special medical centers, about 7 in different parts of the country, which will be very, very important, which will discourage foreign medical tourism. The issue of establishment of investment centers across the country is another thing. The issue of $500 million, billion dollars, I mean naira, that you talk about injecting it into social investment program in the country is another thing that will make the economic flavor to transcend down to the grassroots, which is one of the most important things to consider in a democratic setting. And then when you go into all these things, you will discover that the budget is projected towards having an independence. In other words, a situation whereby the government will discourage so much reliance on foreign assistance, foreign loans. For example, the issue of bailout funds in this 2017 fiscal year is an influx of huge gargantuan growth without translation into development, because it's going into the states without really getting them into accounted for and realizing the fact that they have not been ab initio in our budget estimates. So trying to curtail all these things is the reason why you see the increase of the budget for the year 2018 slightly increased by 16%, in order to enable us have no reason whatsoever for us to go outside the budgetary vision. What is most important is the fiscal discipline of the implementers of the budget. Let the players of the economy, let players of the governmental bodies try as much as possible to restrict themselves within the budget limitation, because budget in itself fundamentally is law. So going contrary to it in itself is the breakage of the law. It's contrary to corruption as per section 15 subsection 5 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So what is most important is the interest of the nation should be uppermost. The consideration of the nation's interest is uppermost. More so, next year, like I said in my prelude opening remarks, we are going into a year of deep political activities. you will see the great resilience, the need, the tickling of the need to bring about a lot of developmental programs, if not for anything, in order to attract the patronage of the electorates ahead of the election that will be coming. So these are the areas that really assisted in us getting this form of budget. The issue of the Niger Delta, for example, the president said clearly that as far as he's concerned, they will go aggressively to continue supporting whatever that will be done to enhance peace and stability, because you need the peace and stability of the area for you to have steady and stable production of the oil, which Nigeria relies upon. The issue of Mambila hydroelectricity project is another very, very important project too, that will assist us in getting about over 3,050 megawatts of electricity. But already we are having about 7,000 megawatts, compared with the galloping 3,000 to 4,000 we were having for so many decades. So this will now bankroll the interest of industrialization in the country. Going again, another thing which the president addressed is the issue of trying to finish within 2018 the railway track from Apapa down to Lagos, down to Ibadan, which is very, very important. And from Ibadan already there is rail track down to this. And the east-west road is another contentious matter, which the president said we will try as possible to get it done within the fiscal year of 2018. The long-awaited expectation of the people of Nigeria having second Niger bridge is another area to the president touched. So by the time you now look at the totality of these assumptions, the only area I'm not so much comfortable is the 50% of the external borrowing. There are areas we can go into within to look inwards into the basis upon which we'll be able to finance comfortably. We have many areas we can use to finance the budget without necessarily going into external borrowing.
All right, let's stick with the projections. And yes, you have a slight increase, but then there's also the worrying issue of a deficit. And of course, he just raised the matter of borrowing as well.
Yeah, before I address borrowing, let me address the issue of the marginal increase. The marginal increase comes about because last year, the 2017 budget, the current budget, we budgeted on $42, $44 per barrel. This year is based on $45 per barrel. And we're yet to have the National Assembly pass, so it is whatever the National Assembly passes that will be used in the final. But this is what the president proposed, and that is what is used in basing the budget. Now, there is marginal increase. Now, we also expect that at that time we did the 2017 budget to passage. Oil was fluctuating, oscillating between $49 and $53 per barrel. In the real market, but today it's gone up to about $62 per barrel, and then so that money is going. There's going to be money in the excess crude, in addition to there being money in the by this. And of course, I think last year we had 2.2 million barrels per day. This year we're a little ambitious, raising it to 2.3 million barrels per day, then including condensates. Then we are also more confident that, given the aggressive drive and the action of Mr. President with the cooperation of the National Assembly in digging out internally generated revenue, then we are going to have a larger amount of money to spend. And he's talked about that there are internally generated revenue which we could exploit without borrowing. I am in total agreement with this. Nigeria, in actual fact, may not need to borrow if the agencies of government that bring out revenue were making this revenue available to government. Some of these agencies get richer and behave as if they were a government themselves, like the NNPC, like the central bank, like a lot of them. They behave as if they were a government itself. So the amount of money they have and spend and marginally remit a little. In Mr. President's speech today, I think Mr. President or Senate President's speech, it was recovered that is about 400 billion that they all remit to the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government. Now, whereas in my estimation, in the initial calculation I did, while I was pursuing on behalf of the executive the consideration of the budget of the agencies, it was a total of 11 trillion in the budget of all the agencies. But by the action of the Senate in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, about a month, within a month, in Mr. Senate President's speech today, he said it's about 40 trillion naira that is in the cabal of these agencies, which is money, which if harnessed, if they spend or what they take is about 10 trillion or so, about 30 trillion could go into the federal government. Therefore, in actual fact, in actual fact, if we have 8.6 trillion being the federal budget as it is, plus the agency's income, the budget of the country is about 48.6 trillion, So we wouldn't really need to borrow. So what we need to do this year is to make sure that we do an aggressive pursuit of the agencies. And of course, part of the danger of what the agencies are doing is that their actions, their spending also increases the internal challenge to the economy, including foreign exchange, because much of what them realize and earn foreign currency, spend foreign currency, So the increase is justified by this. But I also want Nigerians to accept that, to agree that there may not be need to borrow so much. You agree last year's budget was based on a lot of borrowing. And finally, the borrowing of this year, which we did, 2.5 trillion, the last request, the 3 trillion, the 2.5 billion US dollars is to finance the budget, while 3 billion US dollars is to refinance local debt. All that is not going to be spent within the year, so it's going to be carried over to next year. Thank you.
But if you can, if you can raise substantial part of what you require, like you were saying, then you wouldn't need to go borrowing as much as 50%. Yes. But didn't you consider that?
Well, no, these are okay.
Okay, right.
Well, let me just say this. First, I think as we said about the size of the budget and the justification for that. It's in nominal terms, yes, there's an increase of about 16%. But in real terms, if you look at the real value of money between last year and this year, I think that the difference is just marginal. But having said so, I think when you look at the parameters, the assumptions, and you find out, for example, every budget will normally have the aggregate figure that the government intends to spend. In this estimate that have been led before the National Assembly today, the federal government intends to spend 8.6 trillion. That's the size of the budget. But the total revenue that the federal government has available is about 6.6 trillion. What it means is that there's a funding gap. That funding gap has to be closed. It's a lot has been said about what agencies of government, what they generate, they are not able to remit, and therefore the capacity of government is limited and all that. Let me give an example. Beyond what is expected revenue from oil and non-oil, there's also a class of revenue referred to as the independent revenue of government. And that is where all the revenues from agencies, operating surpluses and all that is classified under. For 2 consecutive years, in 2016 budget, the estimate that was supposed to come, the projection was about 1.5 trillion. At the end of 2016 budget year, what was generated wasn't up to 400 billion on that class of revenue. In 2017 budget, the president himself said so today. The assumptions for independent revenue of government was about 800 something billion. But within a 6 months period, when about 600 something billion is supposed to have been raised, a little above 100 billion has been generated. So whether we like it or not, we're going to do our budget based on the figures and what monies are available.
Actuals.
We're not going to do our budget based on the potentials and the capacity and the fact that agencies are making money and are not remitting that money. That's not going to be part of what I'm going to take into consideration in terms of doing a budget. Therefore, if you have a 2.02 trillion naira deficit in the budget, the budget, the government must have a way of closing that gap. Okay. And in our own circumstance and situation, the most government has had to do is to depend on borrowing, whether domestic, whether foreign. And here and there, we keep, and we need to appreciate the cost of borrowing funds internally and outside the country. And for example, in the 2018 budget that we have today that has been laid before us, the ratio in terms of domestic and foreign borrowing to close that 2.02 trillion naira gap is about 50-50. So you borrow about 1 trillion from outside and about 1 trillion from within. But in the last couple of weeks, since after the last IMF World Bank meetings that held in Washington, the Minister of Finance has actually led the charge and the debate about why, compared, if you look at domestic and foreign borrowing, it is more advantageous for the country to borrow from outside, because borrowing from outside, the kind of conditions that you have are not as stiff as within the country. Yeah. And you are also able to make sure that you don't compete. Government is not in a position, therefore, to continue to compete with the local industrialists for very scarce resources that are available within the country. Therefore, where we are today is such that government has to borrow to be able to close a funding gap, and that borrowing, compared, there's so much borrowing has already been done within the country. So if we can have, and the kind of borrowing that takes place outside is for multilateral institutions that can give us these monies with a long period of moratorium and less, interest that are charges and all that. So we need to be able to understand all this, and that we cannot continue to depend on what agencies make. Unless they declare, unless they remit, we cannot do a budget based on that.
Okay, the phone lines are open. We have our first caller from Lagos. KG calling in from Lagos. Hello. Hello. Hello, KG. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, I actually want to contribute my own quarter to 30%. Okay. I want to believe strictly that the government should understand that an average Nigerian now knows the right thing to do, in the sense that we all have, probably we've worked one place or somewhere, or we've worked somewhere before, and we all know how companies are being structured. I want to believe that the Nigerians should be structured. For example, if you employ someone to get the job done for you, as the CEO of a company, you have access to all the details of what that person is doing. I expect that the presidency has access to whoever is heading any parastatal. It's unfair for the presidency to be telling us, the citizens of this country, that they employ people that they cannot give accountability for. Is wrong. If you employ someone as a CBN president or governor and is not doing what you expect him to do, the person is not giving you returns, I believe in the public sector, that person will be fired. If you employ someone as a director somewhere and that person is not giving what he's supposed to give you, in the public sector, that person will be fired. It will be shown to out. So why is Nigeria own different? We have a lot of money in this country. And because we have friends across the board, and they tell us what happened in other countries. Why is ours different? Why must we keep borrowing with all we have? Please, let the legislator cut down their expenses. Let the presidency focus on all these agencies and let's have money to spend in our country, and not of all these excuses. The president has done the best he could by having creating a joint account, and I expect that the joint account should have opened up everybody's account. What is the essence of the joint account? If the senator is still telling us that the agencies are not remitting what they're supposed to remit, so why do you have a joint account? The joint account is uncalled for. And thirdly, before I hang up, I expect that the president should be able to monitor the governors, because I think the governors of each state are actually the one frustrating the effort of this present administration. Now, this is it. I expect the price, whatever funding has been to the governors, the presidency should have a format to supervise that they actually use this money to do what this money is meant for. If the salaries are being paid, we won't be where we are today.
All right.
That's the truth.
Okay.
So please, let everyone do their job, and let Nigerians, let's do our own job, right? We're heading towards the election year, and we all know what will come at the end of the whole thing. So please,
All right, thank you, KG. Well, I'm not sure that the president has powers to.
Over the
I mean,
states.
the governors, the governors are elected as executives of
the
their states as
Constitution
well, just
protects
like the
them.
president. But anyhow, it just tells you how Nigerians feel about what's going on. That well, if all the arms of government, but at the federal, the state, and the local levels get together, and perhaps so many of the issues we face today would have been addressed.
And it really, it's not a hopeless situation, really, you know, because it's you see, the greatest challenge. I mean, the example of JAM. Just some few months ago, the indication came about how much JAM was willing to pay to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of government, right? And I think that it starts with having to control the expenditure of these agencies, because what the experience has come to indicate is the fact that, look, these agencies generate a lot of money, but they also come up with so much expenditure that wipes out all the monies they've generated. A certain agency generates about 100 billion and does a budget that is going to be about 101 billion.
They have
Just
deficit
so they have no money to
remit.
So what it is that I think that it has to do with the kind of appropriation that takes place for these agencies. Once you're able to control their expenditures, you're going to free up quite a lot of money. I mean, it's a challenge of legislation, and I think that we continue to do this, and we're going to get to a point that we're going to get on top of
Right.
this situation.
KG says the executive appoints them. If they don't do what he wants them to do, fire them. What do you think?
Well, I mean, okay. Now, the example of JAM again. Now, they want to find out what happened to previous years. If a particular chief executive is found wanting, that what monies generated by your agency are not being remitted, of course there should be a penalty. If that penalty has to do with loss of job, so be it.
Right,
fact,
back to the phones.
yeah.
We have Ibrahim calling in from Maiduguri. Ibrahim, hello. No, I think we've lost that call from Ibrahim. But just like to encourage you to call back if you can and be part of this discussion. Let's quickly go back to Lagos Center and bring in Tilewa here. Now, the 2017 budget is still on. We have the estimates for 2018 placed on the table. Now, we are talking about consolidation, but again, many Nigerians would ask the question, to what extent has the 2017 budget been implemented? We'll come back and put that to Senator Eno after we've heard your take on that, because even the legislature is expressing some displeasure about the level of implementation of the 2017 budget. What do you think?
It's going to be very difficult for the legislature to express any displeasure with the implementation of the 2017 budget when the budget was only passed by the legislature in May, despite the fact that the executive had submitted the budgets maybe the December before. But having said that, I think what's happening is that this budget obviously is carrying over into next year's budget. And I think it's important that we correct a conception or a misconception about not getting funding. I think the president stated clearly that in terms of independent revenue, there was a 74% shortfall. And with all these shortfalls, there's going to be need for borrowing. And we mustn't confuse the debt restructuring program, which the Minister of Finance has put in place, with trying to finance the deficit. We're still carrying over a deficit from 2017, which needs to be financed into next year. So it's important we realize that. And having said that, it's clear that we've only had maybe 6-7 months of this budget running. And we'll probably want to try and implement this budget all the way to December and then probably consolidate it into January, and it will be a continuous budget consolidated into next year's budget, and we'll try to do the full implementation between January and December next year. Going back to this issue with the debt refinancing, I think the finance minister has stated quite clearly that with the current debt portfolio, there is savings of about 180 billion naira to be made by converting a percentage of that portfolio into foreign lending. and keeping some of that borrowing locally to be able to reduce the cost of borrowing. Now, what is also happening is the fact that with this restructuring of debt and adding more foreign denominated debt, she's identified about 180 billion savings. In addition, as we begin to see inflation rates fall, by mid next year, the central bank governor is targeting inflation by half year next year in single digits. If this happens, then what tends to happen also is the fact that the rates also will drop. So the cost of domestic borrowing will also reduce. We have a situation right whereby we're spending close to about 65% of our revenue servicing debt. And that is why this debt restructuring is very important. And with the macro or the fiscal, with the sort of monetary policy that we're seeing with targeting inflation, that is also what is going to help to reduce the cost of our debt service. Invariably, if you have a budget of 8 trillion naira and you only have revenues of 6 trillion, you're going to have to find a way to finance that deficit. And the only way to finance that deficit is to borrow. And the earlier we borrow, the better, because we need to put this money into capital expenditure to help us stimulate the economy and get the economy out of recession. We can't wait for all these agencies to continue to remit these funds before we do that. Once the economy is out of recession, then companies are doing better, then tax revenues will also continue to increase. And that's really what we need to focus on.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. We have from Kaduna, calling in from Kaduna. We have from Kaduna, Mohammed. Hello, Mohammed. Mohammed, turn down the volume of your TV. I can hear myself.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Yes, good evening. Go right ahead.
Yeah, what the president said. Hello?
Hello, Mohammed.
Yes, you can hear me now. Hello?
Yes, go right ahead. We're listening to you.
Okay, I want to have to say, so what the president presented earlier was impressive.
Okay.
Yeah, what's left is for the House and the Senate to get the job done for passing it in time. That's what I have to say. How can I do it?
All right. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Mohammed, for calling in. Yes, we said we were going to come back to you.
Yeah, the 2017 budget,
yes.
You know, and it's well, I need us to understand the circumstances of the 2018 budget proposal as it affects the 2017 budget. You know, we are attempting by the presentation relatively early of the 2018 budget, and they hope that the National Assembly passes it by the end of the year, to run a budget from January to December. We are trying, through one budget year, to clean up a mess that we all have been part of. What is that mess? That we started by not having a budget till March, not having a budget till April, till May, to the 2017 budget, which was ascended to in June. And then we're trying to return to a January-December budget timeline. And in that process, the 2017 budget year is also an unusual budget year, in which we're going to have, practically speaking, just 6 months to implement that budget. It was assented to in June. We're now on the 5th month of implementation of that budget, and by December it will be 6 months. So, really, what do you expect in terms of the level of budget implementation, which as of now is very, very low? But the hope and the good news is that there is a commitment on the part of the executive that before the end of 2017, at least 50% implementation would have occurred with the 2017 budget. What happens to the balance will be a rollover to to 2018.
2017 is just about ended.
Yeah. And the
little
NTAs
bit.
have done procurements. I mean, what it requires is to fund. I mean, we have, the National Assembly has, you know, a resolution to make to allow the executive to do the borrowing that they're supposed to do to fund that 2017 budget. Once that is done within the next 1 week, the procurements that have occurred and all that are just waiting for monies to be released. You know, so it's the National Assembly has a good reason to complain about the low implementation. I disagree with the fact that we are the cause of the problem and that we don't have to complain. Here and there within the National Assembly, people have come up with opinions about the fact that why do you want to clean up? Because if we had 2017 budget run for 12 calendar months, the problem would not arise. Because 2016 budget that ran for 12 calendar months, about 1.2 trillion was expended on capital, which was the highest figure since the onset of democracy.
Okay, we go to Port Harcourt. Port Harcourt, we have Chima on the line from Port Harcourt. Hello, Chima.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, my contribution is this. First of all, I applaud the President Muhammad Buhari. I applaud President Muhammad Buhari for standing for 1 hour 30 minutes to present budget for Nigeria. I think God is great. I thank God for that. For you to stand for 1 hour 30 minutes to present this budget, I thank God for that. For Nigerians to see that God is working. Another thing again, I'm saying again, now National Assembly member, I said please, I plead for them to please follow up this budget. This is not political, this is not a decision, it's for the benefit of all Nigerians. They should try to meet up this January, December this proposal from federal government for a budget. They should try so that it will move forward. 2017, this president said this in that. Many people are saying, like, let me just say that, I'm sorry to say that, it's like in the police. They said they did not get any budget from 2017. Some of us, they are going, they said they never pay anybody, they say they have not given any budget at the Senate. They have not received money from the Senate. So if they pass this budget, they should implement it. Also, help to put money for all this. So the important thing, transport, power is important. If they can, if they put money to the investment to make Nigerians, to make it to work, because if you move around this country, it's bad. And so they put money in the transport, this railway, and also in the works to build this road. That will make it to go. The people have power. Many people will not be going to this. So in this budget, they start to go to that.
Oh dear, well, point suddenly been made by Chima from Port Harcourt, and we put it squarely to you.
Yes. Now, I think I've been concerned more about revenue. Right. Because if you have enough revenue, you don't need to borrow. And if this revenue, my brother alluded to the fact that the agencies, sometimes they have an expectation of 100 billion and their budget 101 billion so that they don't have anything to pay to the federal government. That can be true. But that is why the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Finance Act say that that budget must be submitted to the Minister of Finance, it must be laid before the National Assembly, and it must be approved by the National Assembly, forwarded to Mr. President to approve again and forward to the agency before implementation. Now, if the budget is submitted to the National Assembly is supposed to look at what are the real needs of the agency, what are the luxuries which are not necessary. You remove it and then allow the allowables, and those other ones which are not allowable, then you cause it to be paid into the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the federal government. Now, I have said here once or twice, there was, on the floor of the Senate, when Sanusi was governor of Central Bank, His Royal Highness, now the Emir of Kano. I brought a motion before the floor of the Senate because you saw the central bank gave to University of Jos and several universities 10 billion, 3 billion, and they went to buy one land in central area to build a hotel. Yeah, and they bought. They even got a company in South Africa to come and remote demolish the building for the purpose of central bank building. Now, I brought that motion to the floor and said, look, central bank, come. You are supposed to remit 80% of your revenue to the federal government. All these monies you are spending only on the educational sector alone and on the entertainment sector, this must be part of the 20% which you are supposed to use. Please, where is the 80% that you pay to the federal government? This was failure of us. I say us because I was in the Senate at that time. Now, this is why the law says, bring it to the floor of the National Assembly. If the National Assembly had approved, they would have known, do we allow this building or you not allow? Now, there is something that is happening now which we must take very urgent action. The Public and Political Office Holders Salaries and Allowances Act. Public and Political Office Holders Salaries and Allowances Act, made in 2003, 2004, and amended or repealed and reenacted in 2011, provides the salary of the president, the vice president, everybody down to ministers, down to chairman of boards and commissions, down to directors general, down to part-time members of boards, full-time members of boards and commissions. Now, if you are appointed as a full-time member of a board or a commission, or executive chairman of a board or commission, your salary and allowances are stated there. What you are entitled is stated there. You are not entitled to. You are not entitled to a house. Is monetized. You are not entitled to a car. It is monetized. Now you see agencies buying several cars, particularly getting to the end of the month. Why? Because they want to use the money. Whereas these are illegalities. Okay. So therefore, it is for us, it is for the National Assembly, when they are considering the budget of these agencies, to look at what is necessary, cut and allow it, and look at what is not necessary, disallow, and allow that money to go into the government purse to avoid borrowing. Okay, we have a Moses on the line from Abuja here. Hello, Moses.
I think I just want to contribute a bit to the topic of this evening. I will talk on budget refinancing. Debt refinance. I do not see the reason why a government should borrow to finance debt. I don't know why we should go and borrow debt, no matter the rate, the interest rate, and to go and refinance debt, either local or foreign loan. We should look inward. I'm happy some days ago, Mr. President said he's going to inject into the Executive Council some new ideas, people with new ideas. We are brilliant people that are able to solve a fund, not a loan, not a grant, and have idea of a financial engineering system that will be able to finance the debt of Nigeria without necessarily borrowing. I also accept what Senator Etana said. We do not need to borrow money. I repeat, Nigeria does not need to go on borrowing any money. We have the capacity, we have the knowledge of how to fund our budget without borrowing. I want to also say something, that if this budget must work, we need to talk to the executives, the ministers. They must work in tandem, they must work together with the president to achieve the goal. I'm sorry to say, some of these executives seem not to believe in the cause of this government. Because when you are a private investor and you want to invest in the Nigerian economy, they give all things as if and you are bringing in money. This is not stolen money, genuine money. You are bringing in money to come and invest in Nigerian economy. Government alone cannot do things. We should look inward. We should make sure that investors have a way of investing in Nigeria. And again, there are factors that I think we should look into that will be able to help to make the budget visible or budget achievable. And these factors are the factors that everybody knows. We talk of electricity, we talk of road, we talk of a lot of things. So we should not just leave the budget to government alone. Finally, I will repeat, please, we don't need to go on borrowing money at all. I want to borrow from a particular statement sometimes ago read by somebody. Do you know frog production alone in Nigeria, to produce frog and export to China, within a year we can earn 8 trillion naira. 8 trillion naira, which is almost equivalent to frog production. So we should look inward, other than laying emphasis on going to borrow and or not borrow. Thank you, please.
All right. Thank you very much, Moses. And, well, things we shouldn't borrow, but we'll come back to that. We'll also ask your opinion on whether we need to borrow or not. But for now, we'll take a short break. When we return, we will look at other aspects of the 2018 budget estimates. We'll also go on and talk to the citizens and what they think about it. And you just stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
Our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Ministry of Information and Culture bring on this message.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. It's the 2018 budget estimates that's in focus, and it's, well, tagged budget of consolidation. So we took the cameras out and spoke to the citizens. What do they think about the presentation coming in November, away from the traditional practice of December, or sometimes not having a budget up till April? Let's hear what Nigerians are saying about it.
It depends on the implementation of the budget. So once we are able to implement the budget, then let's say they are able to use it effectively to help alleviate the sufferings of the masses, then we would say there is hope for Nigerians. I will want to be optimistic that everything will go on well, but the budget should also factor in challenges that Nigerians are facing. So we should be able to see the budget providing infrastructures, providing also, though we have issues with recurrent expenditure. So if government can actually cut percentage of that recurrent expenditure, that will actually help in making up for infrastructures. So that will help, will go a long way to help.
A budget of hope, because it was timely. For the first time, we are now presenting a budget in December. Normally it's supposed to be in October,
This is November.
but we are now having it in November, which means that a budget is supposed to be a plan. Not February, March, sometime almost there, round up, then you present a budget. It will not work. But the timely presentation showed that there is positivity in this year's budget. And secondly, the amount is outrageous. But because of the recession, we are now out of recession, there is hope that the budget will be the final solution to the problem of the Nigerian economy.
Personally, I feel they're making a whole lot of effort in trying to change the whole system, clean the system. Let's first talk about the corruption fight. I think they're doing a lot there. Now, talking about the budget, I think this budget is something that has been planned to have a long-term sustainability plan for Nigeria, in a situation whereby it's gradually improving the system in the country. And then I feel if this continuity can go on, a whole lot of things can change in Nigeria within 5-6 years. Like we all know a lot of third world countries that had this kind of plan, and then they were moving on gradually, and then because they stayed on that same roadmap, they were able to, you know, break a whole lot of barriers and then get all the necessary infrastructure. You can see what Power Minister is doing in terms of roads, trying to improve the power. I think they just passed another law with NEC now, trying to change the system in the country. I think the president himself needs to focus more on what the people are saying. You know, when people say certain things, I'm a Buhari fan, but the fact is sometimes they do some things wrongly, and I feel they should focus on what people are saying and then act more fast on whatever people are complaining about. NAS should, you know, cooperate with this government, not delay and stall on certain things that would affect me and you. Common man on the streets.
Our capital project for the 2017, has it already been done? Is there any capital project that has already been implemented, has been done at all? So if not, 2018 budget, well, it's timely anyways, if they're going to pay. But our most important agenda is they should do the work that the budget is being done, it is being meant for. Whatever we want to spend later, let's get an account for what has been spent before.
But when you have an implementation rate of less than 30% in 2017 budget, it leaves little to be considered, really. Like, you get Nigerians saying, okay, if you check the budget for 2018, I'm sure you will still see Lagos or Ibadan Expressway. So in terms of implementation, they've really not done anything so far. So like what you intend to tag the budget 2018, I don't think it's a budget of hope. I just maybe feel it's just a routine that they need to do. Something they need to, okay, we want to break the circle. In terms of implementation of this year's budget, there was some monies being borrowed not too long ago to finance this year's budget. Now we're having 2018 budget. I would say for the average Nigerian, is not too optimistic, I must say.
All right, the last respondent there saying that money has already been borrowed. We'll probably ask Senator Itainang to clarify that. But before he does, well, you heard the people generally happy with the timing, but again, people are talking about implementation. And of course, this same issue of borrowing came up there. Some people don't think we should borrow at all.
Yes, implementation is important, and if we are to analyze the implementation, we have to consider certain things. First, releases. There's a difference. The budget is an estimate. The releases are the things that will determine the practical implementation or translation of the budgets into developmental phenomena for the country. Releases. And we normally have this problem of releases because of lack of synergy or inadequacy of synergy between the Ministry of Budget and the Ministry of Finance. The separation of this ministry into two really brings about delay in implementation of budget. We discover that there are estimates and approvals as per the budget approvals, but the implementation, the releases, you discover that it got delayed. And in most cases, you will discover that developmental projects are stalled, or rather delayed, for the benefit of the nation. That is one. Secondly, on the issue of budget, of foreign loans, or whether foreign or domestic, a loan is a loan. I have solutions to that. The budget component should have encapsulated issues of dividends of the fight against corruption, so that we be able to see that one as an integral fight with which we will now be able to use in financing the budget. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Section 12 to be precise, talks about ratification of treaties. President Buhari spent about 1 year going around the globe creating goodwill and signing treaties. Treaties regarding litigation with the suspected looters, treaties regarding repatriation of funds, treaties regarding many other things. Now, for you to benefit from those treaties, you must domesticate those treaties for it to become an act of the National Assembly. Like I said, Section 12 of the Constitution clearly provides that there is the need for the National Assembly, precisely Senate, to have two-thirds of its members endorsing that particular one. Greater number of those treaties President Buhari signed with the international bodies have not been domesticated in Nigeria because they have not gotten the blessings of the National Assembly, because they have not been taken to the National Assembly. That is one. If you succeed in doing that, you will have the basis upon which to use international bodies as the harbingers of repatriation of our funds. For example, the Edmond Group, which we have now been suspended. We have not been suspended up to the month of December. There is a need for the National Assembly to fast-track enactment of an act so that we have our IFU independent of the EFCC. IFU is the Intelligence and Financial Unit of the government. Intelligence and Financial Unit is the body that takes care of, is the domiciliary body that takes care of the information of immigrations, tax matters, international trade, illegal transfer or movement of money across the globe, purchases of capital projects across the world, assets, issue of custody of money, whether legal or illegal money, this drugs money, this issue of illegal entry into international borders. All these things are supposed to have this IFU in Nigeria set up as an independent body rather than domesticating it under the EFCC. The domesticating it under EFCC restricts the benefit the nation will get from IFU. So the Edmond Group, which comprises membership of about 280 countries that have signed, we are losing the benefit of peer comparison of the details of the assets that are stashed in foreign countries. So that if we now are able to have ourselves back into the Edmond Group, we will be able to have fair comparative advantage of the information, the support, the necessary facilities with which all those our money we are talking about stashed in other countries will now be bankrolled into Nigeria. When the money is bankrolled, we now take it into Consolidated Revenue Fund. We'll have the basis to now use it to say, yes, we have sufficiency of money. In fact, with that, we don't even need in whatever form to talk about issue of borrowing money. We will have sufficiency of our own legitimate money that has been stuck abroad, bankrolled back to us to be injected for developmental purpose in Nigeria.
And let's go to Lagos before we come to Senator Itai. Yeah, how do you respond to this? Putting the gains from the fight against corruption. Well, Minister says there's so much money out there, and if you recover it, it should form part of what we're spending on improving the lives of Nigerians, and so we may not need to borrow. How do you respond to that?
Cyril, I think it's important that we try to be very realistic. You will recall that part of the Abacha loot, we're just getting it back. The litigation and the time it takes to recover a lot of stolen funds is not something that you will use to finance your budget or you use to finance your budget deficit. And I think it's important that we realize that. One of the most important things that was done this year was the raising of the Sukuk bond. Now, this bond raising, and I think the key thing now is the fact that government is now saying they're focusing their borrowing to support capital projects. And a lot of these projects, the road projects, were delayed because of the timing of funding. But once the government went into the market and successfully raised this Sukuk bond, this money was quickly disbursed to the contractors on the very high-level infrastructure road projects in the country. And by releasing this money, these projects were continued. If we continue to take a look at these abstract means of recovering money, you find yourself in a situation whereby you cannot finance your budget deficit. Debt in itself is a very important tool in financing. It's a question of how you deploy the debt. We don't want to borrow to pay salaries and to borrow to finance recurrent expenditure. As long as you can borrow and put it into reasonable infrastructure, you will get the benefits. And I think what is important is that let us focus this conversation, and I think the ranking senator and chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance, I think had stated clearly what the problems were in the past. But I think the challenge I think I will pose to the senator is the fact that today is the 7th of November and the budget has been presented. So the Senate and the House now have an opportunity to be able to correct the mistakes of the past so that by the end of the year, they pass the budget. And I think that we're all back to square one, and I think that both the executive and the legislative arm of government can now begin to harmonize and now know that we've corrected something that was wrong. So I think it's important that we face the reality that we have a 2.2 trillion deficit that needs to be financed. And that has to be borrowed. We cannot wait for these. I think the president said clearly that the whistleblowing lines were still open, and those funds will come in. And when they do come in, they can augment the budget. But we need to be realistic because our economy is only growing at 0.5%. Our population is growing at an excess of 3%. And I think you can see why the government is aggressive by setting a GDP growth of 3.5%, which is just ahead of the rate of population growth, because that is the minimum standard this economy has to grow. If you do not put these funds in the system, if you do not borrow these funds and put them into capital projects and create the stimulus, we're not going to get this country out of recession. We're not going to get people back into employment. So I think it's very important that, we get this going. So we have an opportunity here to correct mistakes of the past. So let's take that advantage. The president has presented his budget on the 7th of November. Let the legislators respond and try to close out the year with a new budget so that we can start January with a renewed confidence. And for once in a very long time, we can now run a budget all the way from January to December, which is really what we need to get us out of this recession.
I'll to you in a moment, but let's go back to the phones now. We have Amber calling in from Calabar. Hello? Hello, Amber.
evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sure, we can.
Yeah. Yes. I want to first and foremost applaud the President. I want to applaud the President for making a timely effort to present the budget before the year runs out. And secondly, I want to emphasize the fact that borrowing is something that is dangerous. Because the book of Proverbs says, a man who borrows money to forge himself is gathering stones for his grave. So I want to say that, is there no way we can run an economy that is equal to borrowing? And secondly, I want to say that the main problem we always have in this country is implementation.
All right.
If the executive can implement this budget, I think it will go a long way to ease the pain of Nigerians.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Amber. We'll note down this concern you raise, and at some point in time we'll return to Tilewa Dibaju and again put the question to him about whether or not there's no other way to finance country spending than to borrow. But I know that arising from the last contribution by Minasara, there are a number of issues.
Yes,
for
one of the questions that a caller raised before I take on this matter was that we've already borrowed money.
Yes,
I want to say that we have not yet borrowed on the basis of the application request that the President made, because the Section 2122 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act and then the Debt Management Office Establishment Act requires that before you can borrow, you must have the approval or a resolution of the National Assembly. And that request is pending before the National Assembly.
So you haven't borrowed yet.
So we haven't borrowed yet. The only money we got, I think it was 300, which was, I think, last year's own. And then these are the Sukuk fund, which was just released for works to take advantage of the dry season. My brother raised a question that there's a problem about the separation of the Ministry of Budget from Finance. I think it's not a problem. I think it has even facilitated fastened processes, because in previous years the Minister of Finance had the job of managing under the Federation Account Allocation Committee, account from the states, and then managing several other things, then releases and so on. So budget became a very difficult thing. In fact, it was on account of this difficulty that we had a Director General. It was formerly Director of Budget under the Ministry of Finance. Then it was elevated to Director General to be a little different so that they can work differently later. But it became necessary, looking at the experience of Lagos and other states, which have had finance and budget, which have had finance different from budget and others, then it was decided that we create this so that budget and national planning will concentrate on budgeting and budgeting all year round. And so it is not. On the question of release you raised, that the problem, when you budget, it's not that money is in the treasury or in the bank or is in a box. You budget that this is what I will have in this month and in this month and in this month. And if what you have is not enough to release, and you're expecting money from some borrowing end and it doesn't come, then you can't release. Now, we prioritize release for personnel. And don't forget, whatever money comes in goes into the federation account, and it is shared between the states, local government, and federal government. It is only when it is shared and the federal government takes its share that it goes into our federal consolidated fund of the federal government, only then can it be released after paying salary. Then there's another matter you've raised that, and I want to say that yeah, there is one matter which had to be addressed by the Attorney General and Mr. President. That is, there are laws at the National Assembly, because most of the laws that were made says the Minister for Finance shall. The Minister for Finance shall. But now finance has been created from, budget has been created from finance. So those laws should be amended to at least say that the minister responsible for, because although it can be done by the Minister of Budget, but the law has not been changed unless we do what we call executive order. Now there is the question of application of the recovered funds.
Yes.
Now, when you look at the funding parameters of the budget, you'll see that this is how much we're going to get from oil. This is how much we're going to get from privatization. This is how much we're going to get from non-oil, from custom, from inland revenue. This is how much we're going to get from recovery of looted funds. So already it is captured in the budget as part of, and in the revenue profile, as part of the item that will fund the budget. So it doesn't come in and it floats. There was one I listened to when there was a labor dispute between one of the organizations and so on, and they said, look, why can't you pay us? The Minister of Finance said, you have recovered this, you've recovered this. I mean, the Minister of Information said it has been recovered here, it has been recovered here. Where is it? So the Minister of Labour had to explain that, look, there is already an item in the revenue profile that says that this is what it will be used for. Okay. Finally, please, I report the one issue on treaties. You said we have problem on domestication of treaties. Now, I think this is a very serious matter which I've raised many times. Now, and I think sometimes in 2013, a program like this addressed the question of domestication of treaties. It was TuesdayLive, and I participated in that program in 2013. And there was this advisor to the Attorney General then, who said that there is the Treaties Making Procedure Act of 1993. And I submitted, and I still submit, that law is overtaken by the 1999 Constitution, which section 12 of which says that every treaty must be laid before the National Assembly. But it still appears that some persons, officers in the ministry, still believe that since it has been done and it has been this. And I had an opportunity of bringing this on the floor of the Senate also. But I know that there are memos in front of the Attorney General for this to be addressed, because unless it is ratified, it doesn't work. And those agencies are aware of our domestic municipal laws. And so when they come to do due diligence, they find that it has not been done, they quietly go back and don't make comments.
Okay, we have another caller on the line. This is also another May Nasara, but this one is phoning in from Abuja, not the one in the studio. Hello, May Nasara.
Basira. May Basira, the name. Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
May Basira, I'm here with you. Maybe.
Oh, okay, it's May Basira, not May Nasara. All right, we'll just correct that name there, May Basira.
Yes.
Right.
Let me begin with it's a wonderful country, and may God bless Nigeria. And for the first time, we're having some panelists, especially the Nasara also. They have not been Israel presenting and all that. But the truth is, let's have the president calling everybody to a round table. Okay, by this so time period, you have to aware. You release money to this project, capital, architect, and so on. And certain stimuli about what do you call this, home food growing or some seed, school food, and also some money for aging and so on. There are certain things that I think the women need to do to stimulate these people, the poor people around, because people are really feeling the impact. Seriously, people are talking on the street already like getting mad or something, but actually there's a pressure. The vulnerable there, he knows very well. But the government came in and there's serious mess. That was the fact also. So we we actually were not to battle each other, and anybody coming to battle each other is not going to be good for us as a nation. But we need to come together on how do we work, citizen engagement, which is very important, and also the issue of borrowing. There is a starting benchmark for borrowing. It's not as if borrowing is not good. America is also the most highest indebted country in the world. It's not anything. You understand? So we just need to understand certain languages that, okay, you need to borrow to fund because there's a gap. And there's no budget in the world that there won't be gap. You understand? Your expected revenue, the expenditure and all that. It's not, I don't want to speak too much grammar, but the truth is we need to be serious. Seriously, we need to be serious and put certain things in order. We just want, there's nothing the Mr. President is going to do than really stimulating. It's not just enough for you to fund capital projects. Because if you look at the chain reaction, how many people so benefit in, you understand, the laborers and so on. So the chain reaction is a bit not widening as far as the basket people who are going to get the benefit. So, but the APC have so many programs that it's really going to be beneficial if they're going to implement it. And it's going to get down to the grassroots. I think that is more important. And the president and Mr. Issa, the senator, please, for God, I'm pleading with you. You're always in contact with the president. People are feeling this impact. And we are in a financial life and so on. We're not only really talking about budget. Let's do something. Let people feel the impact of APC, because APC actually trying, which is the Baba. He's really trying as for corruption, as for it's a really that thing, what they call tax for him. He's really trying, but we need to help the masses. And also, certain places there is no salary and so on. It's going down to the state. They even do that, you know, there's an area of limitation and so on. But as a father of the nation, he can as well also talk to those state governors to help pay these people, you know, so won't get to be hanging themselves and so on. We all have to work towards making this country great. There's nothing more than that. We don't insult a president, a senator, or let's sit down, let's come together and make this country great. It's wonderful. We just need to be together, because if you go outside, you look at over there, you look at here. So we need to really make something better. May God help us, and may God help this great nation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Basira. Well, Senator, I suppose one of the basic questions many Nigerians would be asking now of the National Assembly is, how soon can they get this budget through?
I was waiting for that. Well, I mean, it's I think there's a commitment on the part of the National Assembly to you know, get this budget quickly passed. Trying to at least. The only thing that I need to also indicate here is that it's also important to understand the tightrope too that the National Assembly has to work to be able to deliver on this budget. First, this is the first time in several years that the budget estimates are late in the National Assembly, when debates on the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper has not even been done. So what it is that now a lot of commendations for the executive of Mr. President for coming to the estimates of the budget in November. All that is more because of the failures of the last several years. I think that, in terms of, just today in the floor of the Senate, the medium-term expenditure framework was committed to the joint committees of finance, appropriations, and national planning. So, together with discussions on the estimates of the 2018 budget, the Senate is also going to begin discussions on the medium-term expenditure framework. Minasara indicated earlier on here that effectively we have about 21 sitting days before our expected December break. So it's quite tight. I mean, but as much as possible, I think that the National Assembly, it's going to brace up to its responsibility and see how fast this can take place. if you look at, even previous years, in spite of the late submission of the budgets, how many months it's taken the National Assembly even to get out the budget because of the processes that it has to go through. In spite of the need urgently to get our budget years aligned to January to December, we must also be allowed to do a pretty decent job at the proposal that have been laid before the National Assembly.
Talking about the number of sitting days left, some Nigerians would say, oh, why doesn't the National Assembly, in tune with the current mood, put in that extra sacrifice? And
well, why not? I mean, it's today's 7th. It's effectively we have about 3 weeks.
6 weeks.
3 weeks for 6 weeks, and we're going to. I guess that in the next couple of days, there's going to be a schedule that is going to be agreed by both the House and the Senate, and everybody's going to commit to it. That's going to set timelines that will end with having to pass the budget before we go on Christmas break.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go to Lagos, and again we had promised that we would raise this issue because one of the callers had specifically mentioned it, and we said to Lewa Adibaju is the economist here, and he says, isn't it possible to finance spending the budget without resorting to borrowing? Why must people borrow? In fact, the caller went ahead and even quoted portions of the scripture and saying borrowing is bad. Enlighten us on that, would you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Cyril. I think I don't know whether I'm defending the government or whether I'm defending my profession. But first of all, optimizing debt within any capital structure is one of the best things that you can do. The federal government of Nigeria currently has a debt profile of about $65 billion. So I think it's important that we understand that. And I think it's also important that the presidential liaison to the National Assembly enlighten Nigerians on what they're doing with the debt restructuring. Debt restructuring is not additional borrowing. It's just shifting this part of this existing debt portfolio, making 40% of the debt foreign and 60% local, so that you can reduce your borrowing costs. By doing this, the finance minister says we're going to save 170 billion naira a year. Now, that's significant savings that can go to finance some of the next year's budget. So I think it's very important that we understand what this is all about. We, as Nigerians, I think, have capacity to borrow. But the problem we have right now is the fact that we're using about 60% of our revenues to service debt because of our high borrowing costs. So this is why we're restructuring our debt portfolio to reduce our cost of debt service. Now, in this budget, what we're borrowing this year to finance the deficit is 1.6 trillion. We're going to borrow 50% of that locally and 50% from abroad. And also, we're going to use the 300 billion from the proceeds of privatization to meet the shortfall for the deficit financing. So it's clearly stated that some of that money will come from proceeds of privatization and the rest will come from borrowing. Now, it's also important to know that the government cannot just go out there and borrow. And I think, as the presidential liaison has said to us, there's what you call the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which limits how much government can borrow. If government tries to borrow in a reckless manner, they'll be breaking the law. So there are laws that guide borrowing also, and I think borrowing responsibly is what is important. What is also important is that the states have not yet enacted their Fiscal Responsibility Acts, which is really why you're having the problems of the state governments not being able to pay salaries. I would have expected that before the president allowed each state governor to be able to draw down on a lot of all these relief money and the so-called World Bank funds, each one of those states should have put in place a Fiscal Responsibility Act. So all governments around the world, even the United States government, is the biggest, one of the biggest borrowers on earth. The debt to GDP ratio of the United States government is 110% of their GDP. But the US government uses only 8% of its revenues to service its debt. So that is sustainable. So as long as you have a sustainable debt service portion, then there's not a problem. Also, what do you do with the debt that what do you do with the money that you borrow? As long as you don't use money, borrow money to pay salaries and to fund recurrent expenditure, you're fine. If you use your debt to fund capital projects and infrastructure projects, you will benefit from that on the long run. So it's important that we understand that debt financing or public sector financing is very, very important. Not only for that, but also for the financial markets. A lot of the pension funds also depend on government borrowing to be able to invest in, because they're also safe instruments. So government borrowing is an integral part of the financial system, and every government needs to have a strong borrowing program to be able to deepen its financial markets. So I think it's very important to look at what we've done, look at what it is within this area, and especially when we're in recession. We have to understand that we are also in a recession. We're coming out of a recession. And it's important that we look at those fiscal issues. Inflation is coming down. Once inflation comes down by mid next year, which the central bank governor has been targeting inflation to single digits, then we'll drop the cost of borrowing. Then it's also become cheaper for government to borrow. Right now, government is projecting next year that they're only going to spend 30% of their revenues to service debt, which is going to reduce the current ratio by 50%. So the fiscal policies, the monetary policies are all going to be very important to see how these things operate. If we use debt properly, it will get us out of the recession.
Yes. What he has said is that one of the fine points of the borrowing and the deficit for the 2018 budget proposal is that none of the components is going to be used to service the current expenditure. If you look at the figures, the total deficit is about 2.02 trillion, and the total capital is about 2.4 something trillion. So some of some of the revenues that the federal government even projects to have will also go into some portion of capital expenditure. If you compare it to the previous years, last year and the previous 2 years and all that, some of what we borrowed was also used to service recurrent expenditure. That is the bad aspect. As long as what you are borrowing is used for capital expenditure, is used to grow the economy, I think that, like you said, there is really nothing, too dangerous about it.
Well, I suppose in the long run, it all boils down to the one fact that you're getting in more revenue, and you'll be saved the trouble of having to do these balancing. And so let's look at the key component of revenue of 2018 estimate is taxation here. And you have a strategy to capture more people, more companies, so as to, reduce to the barest minimum the issue of evasion, tax evasion.
Tax evasion, yeah. Please, I take your leave to respond to one question that the guest in Lagos, that colleague in Lagos raised about enlightening the public about the debt refinance.
Yes, and
what Mr. President has done is to send a request. The request Mr. President sent to the National Assembly was for 5.5 trillion. Of the 5.5 billion US dollars to borrow from externally. And one of the purpose of the borrowing was to use $2.5 billion to fund projects, including the Mambila Plateau, the railway, and so on. Then $3 billion US dollars was to refinance local debt. That is, loans that were taken in Nigeria from the using local loan instruments. And it was at higher rates, sometimes 20–25%. Now there are from externally, there are loans that are given to us at a rate that is about 6 to 7%. And so you now take a loan of $3 billion US dollars, and then take these, refinance it and pay it back to these to the local market. One, you would have reduced the cost of servicing the debt. Two, you will have made money available to the local market to to the local businessmen to borrow from. There is this concern about loan and repayment. I think what the federal government, what we should do is to conduct what I would call loan sustainability audit. Let us go. There were money we obtained. I mean, we approved in the Senate about $1 billion for arms and so on. There were other loans we obtained for water from here and several other projects. There were loans we obtained from water projects in different states. Now, we should have an audit and say, look, most of those loans have matured. Have the project in which we invested them or we took them for, are they in existence and are they doing well enough to pay back, so that we don't look for money from another source, from oil, to pay back a loan which we took to do a project, which project is not paying back itself. Now I come back to your question on tax and revenue. Now what we're doing about tax is to ensure that, one, we make sure that there is the enabling environment for businesses to thrive. Because we're not just looking for tax from the government and those who work in government parastatals and so on. If businesses thrive, because of the success we've had in the enabling Business Environment Council chaired by the Vice President, His Excellency the Vice President. Now, there will be more employment, and then people will earn. They will pay from there. And of course, the mere fact of people having employment really reduces the stress on government on the different sectors. And then what we're also doing is to make sure that agencies, that is the, I work close with the Inland Revenue Service, which my brother is the chair of the Committee on Finance and that, and I get close to them because, and I know that they have adopted several strategies of trapping otherwise floating funds. One of floating tax, which people collect and don't. One of the sources of leakage is that you will do a job, for instance, as a lawyer to an agency or a contractor to an agency. At the end of it, they pay you. When they pay you, when they pay your firm, they deduct tax from there. And when your firm or your company wants to go and obtain tax clearance, they say, come and pay tax. You go to the agencies which you work for, the agencies or the party or the government, the companies which you work for, to give you the receipt for the tax they deducted from you. They won't give you. And Inland Revenue Service will say you must pay the tax. Well, so those agencies and those bodies, those companies, those clients which deducted your tax have not remitted back or remitted all. The same applies to many government agencies, even on. So what we're doing now is to make sure, through the Inland Revenue Service, that when you deduct, you have to pay back. And of course, the last, finally, the other thing is to bring in more people into the tax net. That is what this program VICE that was launched by His Excellency the Vice President, which encourages people who owe that you come. There will be some level of amnesty for you. Just pay part, you know. So we're doing a lot to make sure that more people come in and pay tax. And the worst of all is that now, if you want to do business with many persons, you'll have to produce tax on many areas. So I think we're doing much in that well in that area.
All right, as we begin to wind down now, we'll just see is some of the projections that have been made in the budget and what it's hoping to achieve. We see that Power Works and Housing having the huge chunk of about more than 555 billion actually. And it's been said that without fixing the power deficit, all talk about moving ahead and industrialization would be lost. What do you see?
Yes, that is true. But in expending such a huge amount, I would like to posit a situation whereby it will promote circulation, or rather propel higher economic activities within the country. Why can't we stop dollarization of our economy? In other words, what is wrong in us to make a legislation in such a way that every contractor doing anything within the shore of Nigeria should do it in Naira? Why are we encouraging the use of dollars as against Naira as a sovereign country? Using Naira will now promote the strength of Naira vis-a-vis the international almighty dollar. And using Naira as well will promote more economy, circulation of the economy, for which an ordinary common man will see it on ground. So I would like to advocate a situation whereby, whether now or in the immediate future, we now bring a situation whereby all multinational corporations that will be doing any business in Nigeria should be doing it in Naira. That is the way we will help ourselves, and that is the way the economy will circulate better, and that is the way a common man will now appreciate, yes, there is improvement in the economy, and that will better his family, and that will better an ordinary man on the street.
Well, Tilewa Adebajo, by way of your closing comments, I'd also like your take on that, the dollarization of the Nigerian economy.
Cyril, our budget is in Naira, and I think that that is a topic that I think we should leave for today, because I don't think that is a major problem. The foreign exchange situation in this country that was at a precarious position, I think we're beginning to see more convergence. And as long as we begin to see that convergence and we have a flexible exchange rate system that is market-driven, the issue of dollarization would not arise once you have a foreign exchange system that is market-driven. I think what I would like to close with today is the fact that I read the Vice President's speech yesterday, which captured the mood of the economy in terms of the fact that we are at a very critical point in terms of moving this economy forward. I want to appeal to the ranking senator and chairman of the Senate House Finance Committee to be able to talk to the Senate President and also the Honorable Speaker of the House that, you know, we need to seize this moment, and for a change, we need to get this budget passed. If we can achieve this, the signal we're going to send to not only Nigerian businessmen, but also international business people will be a very strong signal that we've got our act together and we're ready to roll, and we can begin to see significant improvements in this economy. Not only the Nigerian businessmen will begin to spend their money to invest in projects, but you'll also see foreign investors also come through. So the issue of dollarization of our economy will not come into play if we continue to maintain this fixed foreign exchange system and get rid of all the multiple rates we have. We're getting towards convergence. Once you have a market-driven system, everybody, black market, white market, gray market, regular market, government market, all playing in one market, I think will do a lot for this economy. But again, I think as we close today, the President has done his bit, and the executive, they've given us the budget, they've told us what they want to do. I think now the legislators should take it up, and let's have a good Christmas present, and so that we can have a happy new year, and we can begin to realize the potential of this country. Cyril, as we speak today, despite all these problems, Nigeria is still the #1 economy in Africa and the 23rd largest economy in the world. If we got our act together, we could easily be a top 10 economy. Thank you very much.
And your closing comments on that? Well,
it's just to assure Mr. Adebajo and Nigerians that the leadership of the National Assembly and the National Assembly membership have already shown sufficient goodwill and good faith, you know, in this administration, even by allowing the budget presentation to take place today. That in itself is a demonstration of the commitment of the National Assembly to making sure that it cooperates with the executive to deliver on its agenda, trying to ensure that we return to a January to December budget cycle. Secondly, I think that the prospects for our country are bright. The drivers of growth that the President mentioned today have to do namely with crop production, with solid minerals, with rising oil prices, and I think that getting out of recession, the way to go is that we need to continue to seize this chance and to build the momentum, and the National Assembly is not going to be left behind in that regard.
And from the point of the executive?
I want to say that, with respect, let me disagree very violently with Tilewa on the issue, of dollarization. One, I speak on the side of the law. The Central Bank Act says the Nigerian currency shall be the Nigerian naira. And so it is wrong. Now, on the floor, the Senate has sponsored a bill, you know, seeking to criminalize the use of the dollar. I did that because if you go to, I don't want to mention the hotels, big hotels here. You want to buy a watch. You see it is denominated in Naira. In Abuja, you go to a hotel in Lagos, you want to pay. They say it's paid in dollars, and if you don't pay in dollar in that day for that day, you pay at the black market rate. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Anywhere, if you go to Hilton in UK, anywhere you cannot pay dollar. If you need dollar to pay, you must go to black market. You must pay the pound, the currency of that country. The same in Canada. So dollarization is, we must avoid it, criminalize it, before we can recover our currency.
All right, thank you so much.
I apologize, but I discovered I disagree very violently. I agree with my brother,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, we just have a minute or so to go.
In summary, I would like to commend the National Assembly. Honestly speaking, I appreciate the way they received His Excellency the President, and that's the way it should be. I really commend the National Assembly. I thought the refusal to give them releases for the constituency projects, 200 billion.
No, there was no such thing. There was no such thing at all. No. It was just releases for the implementation of the budget.
Importantly, that development is a collective phenomenon. We want to see replication of this at the state level. If the state governors are not queuing in line with the zeal and the determination of His Excellency the President, then there is a limitation to which development level we can reach.
Thank you very much.
And so it is at this point we'll have to leave the discussion and say big thank you to all our guests. Let's start off by thanking Tilewa Adibaju, investment banker and economist, who joined us from our Lagos Network Center. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on this program. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, and Senator John Eno, Chairman, Senate Committee on Finance, we thank you.
Thank you, Sir.
Senator Itai Nang, Senior